Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new or don't know who I am, my name is Madison. I'm an Instagram creator, blogger, and high school fashion design teacher. And here on YouTube, I film sewing videos and tutorials to share my love and passion for fashion with you all. You can also follow along on all of my style adventures over on Instagram at Miss Madison Lynn, or check out my blog in Vintage. Alright, I am so excited about today's video and specifically this project because it's been a project I've been toying with for a really long time and just never really wanted to tackle, but now that I've kind of been stuck at home for the last 2 months with everything going on in the world with COVID-19, I have really got back into sewing, and something that I kind of decided at the beginning of all of this was that I wanted to tackle a really big project where I take a designer dress and I redesign it. So I've seen this dress all over Instagram because some of my favorite bloggers wear dresses by this designer, and so I've kind of looked at the designer pieces and I really love everything they create. A lot of it is tulle and it's just colorful and kind of girly and really fun, but there's this one specific dress, I call it the strawberry tulle dress. See if we can pop a picture of it up right here, and I just thought it was always so pretty and I wanted to try and recreate it. So it's a dress by Lirika Matoshi. It's a New York fashion brand in New York, obviously, and the designer creates all these really cool pieces, and so I wanted to recreate it because obviously I'm not someone who's going to go out and spend like $500 on a dress. It's almost like $500. I think the original dress is like $450. So obviously I'm not going to go spend that on it, and I also wanted to challenge myself to create something. So we're going to see how this goes. I bought a lot of tulle off of Etsy, and I will say that probably what I spent on this is about a little less than half what the actual dress cost, but I don't think I'm actually going to be using all of the tulle I got, so it will probably come out less, but still obviously it's not like a $50 dress based on a $450 dress. But we're just gonna roll with it and see what happens. I have seen a blogger that I follow wear it a couple times, and I've just always loved it because I feel like it's girly while also ladylike, and it's just so pretty. And I love the strawberries on it, and I love the blush color, and so I wanted to kind of try and redesign it, which means using fabrics I have never used before. So a huge part of redesigning an actual designer dress is finding fabric that either mimics that or it's the exact same fabric. So I got really lucky, and on Etsy I found strawberry tulle fabric. Now the thing about the original dress is that the strawberries are actually glitter, which would be way easier to work with. I wasn't able to find that fabric, but I found a fabric very similar, except the strawberries are in sequins, which still looks really, really pretty, but it's probably going to be a lot more difficult to sew with, so we're going to see how that goes. And then the dress is also edged in like a nude peachy blush tulle along the bottom of the sleeves, the neckline, and the bottom of the skirt. So I also had to find that shade of blush pink tulle to not only match my fabric but also to be as close to the original dress. And so that was tricky because looking online at like 15 different shades of blush pink tulle is really tough to find the shade that matches the original dress and that also goes with the strawberry tulle fabric. Thankfully though, I was able to find a fabric and a tulle that was close enough in the shade, and when it came in the mail it actually matched pretty well. So this is the strawberry tulle fabric that we're going to be using with the sequins right here. Yeah, like that. So I found this on Etsy, and I think I ordered like 10 yards of it. I really don't think I'm going to be using all 10 yards, but I wanted to be safe rather than sorry. So this is what we're going to be using for the overlay of the dress, and then it's going to be overlaid over the top of my other tulle, which is this. And I think I got like 15 yards of this one. Again, I don't know if I will actually need 15 yards, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough. So this is more of a nude peachy color. You can kind of see that. And so up next to each other, they look a little bit different, but once they're layered, because they're tulle, they actually tend to take on the shades of each other and they work really, really well together. So we'll see how all of this goes. So this is definitely a big project, but it's going to be fun, and I get to figure out how to use all this tulle. So what I've decided for this project, since it's a design that I haven't used before, and I want to make sure that everything is working as it should. So I'm actually going to make a muslin mock-up. And so a muslin mock-up is where you basically create the actual design, but out of either a cheap fabric or muslin fabric, which is what most fashion designers use. I'm just going to use like a sheet that I have as my muslin. I'm going to work out all of the details for the pattern there so that when I actually go to cut my actual fabric, I cut the correct pieces and I don't waste anything. So for this project, I'm going to be using my slopers and I'm going to be adapting them to create new pattern pieces that work with the style of this dress. And then for the skirt, we don't actually need a pattern piece. We're just going to be used based off of measurements. So this is going to kind of be a trial and error project, but hopefully we can work out most of the details on the muslin first. And I'm not actually going to film the entire process of that because it will take a really long time and I want to make sure to focus on the actual dress, but I'll show you a little bit of footage for that. So let's get to work. Now for this project, I decided to create a muslin mock-up just to work out any kinks along the way, and I didn't actually film the process of turning my slopers into my pattern pieces, but basically all I did was create a deeper V in the front neckline of my bodice, and then for the overlay sections, which are the pieces that I'm draping in this clip, I just created extra wide sections of my bodice front. So I wanted to make sure and drape it on my mannequin before I actually cut my regular pieces out of my design fabric. Now the reason why muslins are such a great first step is that you can make any adaptations to your original pattern. So as I was draping this, I realized that I needed to narrow the shoulders of my bodice, and I also needed to change the shape of my overlay. So that's what I went and did in this clip, is I just took my muslin that I had cut down to the specific size, and I just retraced onto my patterns. So now I'm ready to actually start cutting the pattern pieces out of my fabric, and because I'm working with tulle, I'm going to have to line it. So I got this stretchy polyester fabric that's kind of a nude color, and that's going to be sewn onto my tulle. It's not going to be used for the skirt, but it's going to be used for the bodice. We're going to have a different lining for the skirt and the inside of the bodice. So that's what I was cutting out here, and after I cut out my lining pieces, I'm then going to go cut out my bodice pieces for my strawberry tulle fabric. So something that I did for this project that I hadn't done in the past is I used a rotary cutter and a cutting mat to cut out all of my pattern pieces, and this was literally a lifesaver, especially since tulle is so slippery. So all I do is just use pattern weights or fabric weights. Really, it's just washers from Lowe's to hold down my pattern pieces, and then I just use my rotary cutter to cut all the way around. And now we grab our 15 yards of tulle to cut out more pattern pieces. So for this bodice, like I said, there's a lot of layers. So you have your strawberry tulle layer, which is layered over the nude tulle, and then that is layered on top of your nude lining. So there's a lot of fabric that we're working with, but it's important to do the layering to make sure that you get the correct colors, and also so that the pink really shows through, especially since the lining is such a different color. Now because the front of this bodice has a lot of draping that goes on, I just created a pattern piece that was extra wide from the bodice that would then be gathered to create those drapes. So I cut that out of just the strawberry fabric because it's going to be overlaid over the actual bodice. Now we have to layer all of our pieces together. So I decided that I would baste my 2 layers of tulle and my lining together before I actually sewed my pieces, just to make sure there wasn't any shifting going on. So in order to make sure that my fabric didn't shift, especially since I'm using 3 different pieces and layers, I just pinned it together before I took it over to my machine and basted it. Since this dress also has darts in the front and the back to create a better fit, I went ahead and made sure that I put those markings in place as well. Now, once all of the layers for the front and the back of my bodice are pinned into place, I took it over to my machine and basted them. This is really important when working with layers so that your layers don't shift, especially with this fabric. So I just put it on a basting stitch and sewed all the way around all 4 of my pieces. Now, while I was at my machine, I went ahead and put my basting stitches into my draped overlay sections of my bodice. So those basting stitches are going to go at the top shoulder and at the bottom right, kind of where the waist of the dress would be. And I will go and gather those later on, and then those will be sewn and layered onto the front of the bodice. Now, because I like to do 2 lines of basting stitches, I always make sure to tie the tails of the front thread and the back thread together before I gather it. This way I'm working with less tails and it's a lot easier to gather. Now, before I can start actually assembling the bodice together, I need to make sure that I go and sew my darts into place. This is going to make sure that the bodice really has a fitted style. Now, once the darts of my bodice were complete, I took my bodice pieces over to my mannequin and started working on the draping of the overlay sections. So they are already gathered, so I just pinned them into place and then tried to figure out how I could lay the strawberries. The one downside to this tulle fabric with the sequins is that the strawberries don't lie as flat, especially when they're gathered, so that was a bit tricky. You might also notice that I'm using a different mannequin for this project, and that's because this is a mannequin from my classroom. Don't worry, I didn't steal it, I just borrowed it for the summertime. But this is an actual professional dress form, and it works a lot better when draping and pinning fabric into place. So I used it for this project when I was draping the bodice sections for this design. Now, after all of these pieces are draped as I wanted them to lay, I pinned them to my front bodice sections, and then I took them over to my machine to sew them into place. This way there will only be 2 pieces for the front of my bodice and the drapes will already be overlaid. It's kind of hard to describe how I created this draping overlay for this dress, but basically it's just a gathered section that's sewn over the existing bodice. Alright, now that part of our bodice is complete, it's time to move on to the skirt. So for the skirt, we have the tulle section, which we don't actually need a pattern for, but we also have the lining, which is going to be a circle skirt. So I used my sloper skirt to create the circle skirt. This is one of my favorite hacks and reasons why I love slopers, is because all you have to do with the pencil skirt for my sloper set is to slash it, tape the top, close the darts that already existed, and then you just spread it to create your circle skirt. It's the coolest thing in the entire world. So this is going to be the lining of our skirt. It's this really awesome, soft, flowy, and slightly stretchy fabric, and we're going to use this same fabric to create the lining, the second lining for our bodice. Now, because this dress has such a low V in the front, I decided to add in padding to the bodice. Now, usually you can buy padding at a sewing store, but I just decided to use an old bra because we're all about recycling and redesigning around here. So I just pinned those into place on my mannequin for the inside lining of my bodice, and then I used a zigzag stitch to attach it to that inside lining. Now, after that is complete, it is time to sew the sides of my original bodice together, which is the pieces that have the tulle, and then I'm going to do the same thing to my other lining. Like I said, there's a lot of layers that are being used for this bodice. Now, another important design element for this dress are all of the ruffles. So there are ruffles on the neckline, the sleeves, and the hem of the dress. So before I can finish completing my bodice, I had to go and create the little ruffles that are going to edge the neckline. And I created that by just cutting 3-inch wide sections of tulle, folding in half, and then basting along the top. That will be gathered to create my ruffles. Now, outside of that, I also needed to make the ties that are going to be used for the bows of my dress. I used those same 3-inch pieces of tulle, folded them in half 2 times and then sewed them down the side and closed on one end. And then I'm going to use my handy loop turner to turn it right side out, therefore creating my own little tulle type of ribbon that will then be a really adorable bow on the front of my dress. And now it's time for the tedious process of gathering. Honestly, I think I have had gathers in every single one of my projects videos so far, and this dress has the most. So I spent a lot of time doing gathers for all of these ruffles, but it definitely makes the dress what it is. So these are the little ruffles that are going to be used on the neckline. Now again, we go back to our sandwiching step. We are going to sandwich the bodice with the ruffle and then the lining on the inside, the lining section that has the pads. So we just pin that all up and down the front V, the neckline, and then we go and sew that into place before we turn it right side out and then kind of have our almost completed bodice. Now before our bodice can be complete, we have to create the sleeves. So the sleeves are created with a layer of strawberry tulle, regular tulle, and those 2 pieces are used to sandwich the tulle ruffle. Once the tulle ruffle is sewn into place, then we can go in to add our elastic. So once my ruffle is sewn into place, I just flip my fabric right side out, and then I added an additional seam to create a channel for my elastic. The elastic will be hidden behind the many layers of tulle. Now because these sleeves are a very poofy style, I also needed to add in my gathers. So I basted my 2 layers of tulle together, and then I added an additional basting stitch right at the center top of my sleeve that will be gathered for the poofy sleeve style later on. Then I took my bodkin, which is a really cool sewing tool, attached my elastic, and then ran that through the channel of the bottom of my sleeve. Once that was complete, I just sewed the undersides of my sleeves together to create the actual sleeve, and then I went and pinned that into my sleeve holes on my bodice. And as I was pinning those into place, I was also gathering my basting stitch to create the perfect gather placement, and then I took it over to my machine and sewed them, and the bodice is basically almost done. Once my sleeves were attached to my bodice, I took it over to my mannequin to pin it and just make sure that everything was laying as it should, and then I also added in a panel of tulle to the deep V in the front. And now it's time to attach the lining of the skirt. So this is the circle skirt that I drafted, and that's just going to be pinned and sewn onto that inside lining of my bodice, the lining that has the pads. And now it's time to cut the actual skirt using measurements. So I decided to use the selvage edge of this tulle for the top of my skirt. The selvage edge of this tulle fabric doesn't have sequin strawberries, which means it will be a whole lot easier to gather. So that's going to be the top of my skirt. I drafted and cut it to be 54 inches wide across the top, and then the length was just cut to a midi length on myself. And I'm going to cut 2 of those pieces. They're going to be sewn together at the side and then gathered along the top. And I'm going to take those exact same measurements and cut them out of my peach nude colored tulle, because there are going to be 2 tulle layers for the skirt that will be on top of the skirt lining. So I'm going to baste all of those layers together along the top, and then I'm going to go back in and add in another basting stitch, which will then become my gather. Alright, now that the basting is done for the waist of my skirt, I am going to baste and gather my ruffle. So off camera, I cut my ruffle sections. They are just the width of my tulle, and then they were 8 inches wide. So I sewed those all together, and then I sewed a very, very, very long basting stitch all around the top of that. And now it's time to spend a long time gathering it. So as I was gathering this, which took a while, I probably spent like 45 minutes gathering all of these pieces, it was a lot of tulle, but we want it to be really ruffly and poofy at the bottom of the skirt. I also had to make sure that it wasn't too small of a gather for the bottom of my skirt, and once the measurement was all perfect, I pinned it right sides together along the bottom of my skirt, pinning it only to the strawberry tulle section, and then I'm going to sew that together. And now it's time once again to do more gathering for the waist of my skirt. I honestly think that I need to come up with some type of catchphrase that has to do with gathering because I say it so often for all of my projects. But after that is gathered to be the right size for the waist of my bodice, I pinned it to my bodice, which was the bodice piece that had the strawberry tulle and the mesh lining. Sewed it together, and then that is going to be flipped down to create the actual silhouette of the dress. And now it's time to do a mannequin fitting, so I switched to my other mannequin for this fitting because my other mannequin, while it is not as professional, is more close to my actual waist measurement. So I use this for fittings when it comes to my zipper placement, and I also wanted to figure out the placement for the ties, which turned out so well. These were made out of little pieces of tulle that were sewn together. And last step is to attach the light pink invisible zipper to the back of the dress. Alright, so it's like day 4 sewing the dress, and I just finished it, minus a few hiccups that occurred because no matter how many years you've been sewing, you still make really stupid mistakes. But anyways, it is finished, so I'll show you a little bit of some of the details for sewing wise, and then you'll have to wait to see the actual dress and the reveal. Alright, so here is the dress. We have our bows that tie in the front. I put like a loop here so that these would stay in place. This, since the dress has a really low V, I added in some tulle just for, you know, a little modesty, and it also helps hold the front together. We have the back, and like I said, no matter how many years you've been sewing, you still make stupid mistakes like melting holes into your dress right by your zipper, so then you have to glue pieces of fabric into place. So I'm hoping that this glue will dry a little bit clearer. It's not horrible, but obviously it's kind of tacky and not what I wanted on this dress, but we're just moving on and trying to forget about it. Here's the inside of the dress, because I feel like the inside of this dress is super important because it is lined. There are pads. Like I said, I added this tulle, so I need to trim those edges, but that is there. And then this dress has the skirt on the inside, which is nice. So the inside has a lot of really awesome technical things, which I'm happy about and proud of. And it's super comfortable and super soft on the inside. And then you have ruffles and sequins and all that goodness. I'm very happy with how the dress turned out. Honestly, I went into this project thinking it was going to be super hard, and while it was challenging at times, it also turned out a lot better than I thought, and it just is seriously such a fun dress, and I cannot wait to show it to you all. Alright, here is the grand reveal of this dress. I am honestly so happy with how this dress turned out, and if any dress is twirl worthy and perfect for dancing, this would be the one. I learned so much through making this dress, and I'm honestly just so proud of how it turned out, and I am looking forward to many more designer remakes in the future. You guys are seriously the best. Thank you so much for watching today's video. You make what I do so much fun. So if you were inspired by this project, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any more projects in the future.